Welcome to Career High, where we dive deep into school district scandals. Just kidding. Career High spotlights visionary educational leaders who are heading up the charge in career-connected learning. I am your host, Jeremy Smith, co-founder and CEO of Pegasix. And with me today, most importantly, is Kristy Cleppe. Kristy is the principal at Bettendorf High School in Bettendorf, Iowa. Kristy, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Tell me a little bit about yourself as well as about Bettendorf High.
Sure. So Bettendorf High School, we're kind of a 912 building here in the Midwest, kind of in the Quad City area. I would say when I first started here many years ago, we had about 1,600 kids in the high school. We're kind of about between 1,350 and 1,400 now with some of the private schools and kind of different opportunities. And so very supportive community, obviously strong around fine arts and athletics as well, and extracurricular activities. A little bit of background about myself. I'm happy to be here. I'm pretty passionate about career and technical education, as I'm kind of a non-traditional route into education. I started as a financial analyst right out of college. I had a accounting and business administration degree and was working for a bank, and the bank had created my position and it was getting bought out. So my position was going to dissolve. And so at that time, our area college in my hometown needed someone to teach them night classes because a plant was closing, and asked if I would come in and teach some night classes for them. And I said, sure, I'm in a transition at this time. I started doing some coaching at the area high school as well, and just kind of fell in love with teaching. And so at that point, I went back and added my teaching degree and initially started teaching business education, which is right around that, career and technical, and built a lot of programs into that, and then just kind of worked into administration. And so we've been doing a lot around career and technical education since back before, probably back in 2010, with really career pathways taking off around 2015, and started kind of building a vision from there.
Gotcha. So what led to that? Because that's very early in the adoption curve. What was it that put you guys sort of at the forefront like that?
Some of it was a little bit state-led, looking at kind of college graduates in Iowa, and there was a downward trend on students actually completing or actually getting a degree or certification within that 6 years, after college. They started tracking some of that. And we were seeing still about 60 to 70% of our kids would still go some type of post-secondary training, but we were having an increase of students saying, hey, I want to do other things. College isn't for me. So it was kind of a shift a little bit in our community. And so we felt like we had to start providing different opportunities. And then we were really that bridge between high school and post-secondary, where some of those kids that maybe on the 4-year weren't having success. And we started looking at why, how do we bridge that gap? How do we strengthen the transition to that to help students be more successful? And so we kind of started down this vision working with, we have several area high schools, and then we have a community college in our area. So we kind of started creating meetings and kind of talking through what programs do you have? Where are students not being successful? How do we start working through to bring some of that into the high school? Because kids they're comfortable here. They don't want to leave their building necessarily. So how do we start creating some partnership around that? And it's just kind of evolved from there. So that was kind of at the initial start where some of those conversations began.
That's interesting. What were some of maybe the sort of roadblocks that you ran into when trying to make this transition or addition to the way you did things?
Yeah, I would say, some of the roadblocks you initially run into is just the language difference between how, colleges have their programming or their scheduling set up versus high school. We are a block schedule where some other schools are traditionals. So how do you work in that school day if you're sharing instructors, things like that? And we initially had it set up where they would go to the college, and that wasn't super popular. And so as we started serving the students, they liked when we could bring the instructors in and stay within their home environment. So we started exploring, how do we get our teachers trained or certified to be approved to teach within our high school setting. And that's where it really blossomed, where we could, keep it here. And if we could start them in the programs, then kind of by that senior year, they're a little bit more comfortable going out and maybe going over to the college campus or trying some different things. So we ended up starting with what we call the Future Ready Coach to help with some of this. And now it's evolved into, we have a whole career center that really starts this 4-year kind of planning, as early as 8th grade. Really, we've kind of spread down on our middle school.
Talk about the Career Center a little bit. What's that like? How's it organized? What's the student experience with that?
Yeah, so how that came about is when this all started years ago, like I talked, this partnership, we had an advisor that would come over from the community college and would work with students to advise them on what classes to take as they want to start taking on some college level classes while they're in high school. What ended up happening is we utilized that individual and hired her on as what we call a future ready coach. And so she worked with our student services and really worked around career and academic planning. And then as we've built several different career pathways, we're working with our core classes on career connected learning right now. We built kind of this career center. So our future ready coach is in there. And then we have kind of a work, trying to think what her title is, but we have like another staff member in there that helps with field trips, job shadows, internships, things like that. So that career center organizes colleges that come in, military that comes in, different field trips, just career awareness. They partner with teachers to bring things into their classroom. So I could talk about some of those activities we do. So that's kind of the hub for all things kind of career and college ready in a sense.
What are the 4 pathways?
So some of it originally went around CTE. So we started surveying our students early on in their 4-year planning, like, what do you want to do after high school? And we recognized we had a lot of students that were really interested in the health sciences. I want to do something in healthcare. So we actually built a program. We were actually went out and we had a Spanish teacher that had kind of a medical background, and we were able to get that authorized to the state and start building like a health careers pathway program. So they will take an intro to health careers class where they explore all different types of pathways in health careers. And then speakers come in from the different industries and talk with them. So that's like the foundational level. And then it builds up to they can get their CNA while they're in high school and then go on to nursing programs or whatever their rad tech. They work in med tech, different things like that. So health sciences, welding, we've done around a basic welding certificate. We've scaled back on that a little bit just because the unions and industry are kind of looking for the apprenticeship opportunities have kind of went down a little bit. So we scaled away from like the dual credit and working more of that on the job type experience, which is a lot what you guys are talking about within your programming. The kids started to do way too much online, and we really felt like the hands-on experience is what's really important. So we have welding, auto, but we're sadly we are missing an instructor for that right now. So we're out there searching, but not a lot of people in college for an auto teaching degree. So auto, we have computer science that has some robotics in there. We have engineering. We have different levels of business. We have culinary arts, childcare, education, and we're building kind of a criminal justice type approach right now. So we try to have something in a lot of the different industries outside our core and STEM and things like that.
I love that because, I mean, it's good because a lot of times when you think of or see, like, CTE and things like that, it's oftentimes just exclusively blue collar, and personally, I like to see the mix where it's both because both paths are, equally.
The training's just different.
Exactly.
So we've really tried to hit where there's kind of a pathway in each of those different industries, depending on what their post-secondary plans are. And then now what we're trying to do is work with the teachers to build career connected learning within their classroom to relate it to like, why am I learning, this?
Algebra or whatever
Yes. Why do I
geometry.
need to know the Pythagorean theorem?
Right.
Things like that.
Right. There was a principal on a previous episode who I was talking to, and I think he was in Iowa City. It was Mitch Gross at Iowa City West, and was telling me about how they have a construction geometry class, I think it is, where it's just fully integrated like that, and I was like, "Oh, that's what a great idea that is," because, I mean, I've just seen I know everybody has. You've seen when students can see the applicability of a skill they're learning, everything clicks so much more readily, right? I mean, I know kids who are terrible at math. I mean, whether kids now or kids when I was a kid growing up who were terrible at math, but whenever it came to sports and statistics and, like, they were savant,
Or on top of it. Yep.
right? I mean, just
Yep.
they could do division, while juggling and, baking a cake. Like, it was just because it was not only something they were interested in, but they could see the applicability of it, and it was just, and they had context for it all. And so, I like that approach and kind of what you're talking about of trying to, sort of integrate the 2. And, kind of an analogy I think of it is, vitamins are, can be good for you, right? You take a vitamin C or D, whatever it might be, and it can be good for you, but it's not as good as when you're getting it through the food that it's already in.
Right.
Right? It's just
Yep.
if it's baked into the thing, right? If it's already just part of the nature of it, it just seems to sink in better, whether it's vitamins and minerals or, learning. It just seems to be. So I really like that approach. What do you think is the most or are the most important elements for a career connected learning program?
For us, our biggest success is if the industries are evolving so much, and so I think that's the hardest part. And you've already talked about it a little bit. We're preparing kids for jobs we don't necessarily know exist yet. So what are those skills? And so we meet with some advisory. We have advisory groups, in our area that we meet. And like, what are you looking for in employees? And a lot of times it's kind of the soft skills, the attendance, showing up, punctuality, a lot of those type of things. But I think some key components are those skills of, how do you collaborate? How do you work together? How do you problem solve? How do you do all those things with an actual product? And it's not that independent learning, right? You have to look at those career atmospheres. So I think in building those, there's a couple different foundational things. You need to be able to first meet their interest, level that can actually get them to explore. My passion has always been about high school is about figuring out what you're good at and maybe what you don't want to do, right? Like, here's some things I think I'm good at, some careers, but along the way, I'm going to find some things. Okay, that's not my cup of tea, and that's okay because it's that discovery.
Exactly. Yeah, it's better than okay. It's good. It is just as valuable to find out what you don't want to do.
You don't want to go spend all this money, yep, and find out I don't want to do this. You know, I was somewhat one of those people. I was getting my CPA and studying for the test. I'm like, I really don't want to take care of people's money, but I just loved accounting. I had a great teacher. So how do we help separate those things of good experiences versus this is what I truly want to do? So I think as much as you can mimic on the job training, what that atmosphere is like, what it's going to take to do those jobs, I think is pretty important.
So what's kind of interesting is you're obviously talking about all the career connected learning. There's still, I mean, you mentioned, 60, 70% where you guys are who are still going to college. And so how do you balance the sort of career connected learning and the college prep? Given that, yeah, I mean, there's so many benefits to doing career connected learning, but if you neglect the college prep for those kids that do go to college, they may not be prepped.
I think that's the career connected piece that we've started to talk a lot about this year is how do we bring some of that into some of those core classes? So for an example, one of the things our career center, our future ready coach has worked with our composition teachers on is where does writing take place in several different types of careers? Why is communication, so important and how do we connect that? So we brought in a panel of all these different industries, police officers, journal, newspaper, medical, like several different careers, right? Because you have a classroom of kids sitting in front of you that all want to do different things. But then we talk to them around like, how do you use communication in your job? Because composition is a writing class. Why is writing important? What's the AI world of writing? How does that impact? And so bringing that career piece within their core, because if they are thinking about going in, I want to be a sports editor, I want to do this. How do we connect this to your careers and what you're learning? So we're trying to build off more and more where it's within those courses and what that looks like.
That's a great approach. I love that because when you initially were talking about integrating some of the career connected learning into the courses, I was just thinking of the effectiveness for learning, right? It's a better way to learn when they see the relevance. But what I didn't think about was what you were just saying, which is, and at the same time, you kill two birds with one stone, right? You're able to have enough time, capacity for both the career connected learning and the sort of academic, right? Because it's happening at the same time.
Business, although business is considered a career in technical education, we have a teacher who does an activity called Shark Tank. If you've seen that show, so it's business classes. A lot of those students are going to go on to get a 4-year degree, depending on what that is. But how do you get some of those skills, that are important for that on the job training? So he actually has people in the industry that will come into the classroom, and they're kind of like the people who are going to invest in their idea. So they have to come up with an idea, come up with the business plan, do all these things, and then do their pitch to these investors of like, will you, support my entrepreneurship or my idea and stuff like that. So they get a little that real life experience, actually reserves our boardroom for the district to make it look,
Oh, that's fantastic.
professional. And yeah, so those are just kind of some different examples that we do. We're connecting with our science department right now in a local college and just getting in and seeing different scientific labs, trying to connect some of that stuff that way.
That's great. And do the kids, I mean, I imagine I know the answer, but do the kids really, no pun intended, connect, with these experiences? Is it like spark them?
Yep, I think there's a lot. I mean, I think you're gonna have some where it sparks them because 'cause they're like, "Oh, this is what I wanna do," and then you have the other like, "I don't wanna do that at all." Like, I remember my daughter coming home, she wants to do something in health sciences, and in her intro to health class, they had, a career come in, kinda more funeral home, that prep and kinda do all that stuff for the deceased or whatever, and she came home, she goes, "That was the most awful thing I've ever experienced." I'm like, "Well, now you know you don't wanna do that." She goes, hear them listen about, their job, whatever, and no discredit to them. It bless them, there's gotta be people that have to do that, and
It's
they
true.
do their best to help people in a very difficult time, but it was adamant my daughter was not going to do that as a career. So, that granted, that was just one snapshot of that class, and then a different speaker comes in.
There's as much value in knowing that you don't want to do something as there is in knowing that you do want to do something.
It's neat to see those light bulbs turn on, and, even from the military standpoint, we have a lot of those different connections that come in and seeing the kids excel. We actually just had one of ours, back in the building yesterday that went on and went to military school and, came back to speak to kids on the path to get there and stuff, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, how long have you been a principal at Bedford High?
Principal-wise, this is actually finishing up my 4th year, but I started here as a teacher back in 2004. And then in about 2011, I moved into administration. So I was an associate principal up until about 4 years ago, and then this is my 4th year as a principal.
What would you say are, I mean, obviously, they're just the 2 totally different tracks, but, administration and teaching, but was there anything kind of moving into administration that you didn't realize or maybe underappreciated, positive or negative? Finally going to the other side of the fence and you're like, "Wow, I didn't realize this," or, "I have more empathy for that."
I think yes, on both sides. I think you don't recognize as a teacher what actually goes on all day long that the administrators are working through, right? But I also think on the administrator side, there's that part of just working with kids all day long because in your roles, even I worked with kids a lot in my dean's role and an associate principal, but I would say as a principal, a lot of times I work more with adults. And so, you kind of have some of those shifts. I think it works both ways. I think there's a lot to be said on go in and being a teacher for a little bit when you're an administrator and also have a teacher shadow an administrator because you need them both, right? But they see and they experience different things. And it's such a powerful thing when you can have that group work together on where you're trying to get to. And so we've done a lot of work around the career connected stuff. So from an administrative end, you can help make that stuff happen. And then you can get resources in front of the teachers that are really passionate about those careers, which is pretty cool.
Right, yeah. Do you find from a staffing perspective, you were talking about the automotive, vacancy right now. Obviously, it's regardless of geographic location, it's harder to fill those sorts of specialized roles. Do you find, like, for the more general, teaching roles that it's harder or not harder, but just given your location, which isn't necessarily like Des Moines or, with a greater population density, that it's harder to fill roles or pretty easy?
I think it depends on the content area. I would say in our industry, there's a little bit of a shortage. I mean, it used to be we'd have tons of applicants for open positions. I think for a while, it was pretty slim, especially in leadership. But I think over the last year, I think it's starting to like progress and be a little bit more, which is good. But the specialized area is a little bit hard, especially if there's the dual credit classes with colleges. They have to meet specific requirements in order to teach the class.
I know you did for the sort of first generation of teachers, but if a new teacher, if you need to fill a role, will you sort of help upskill a teacher if they're interested in it, or do they need to come with those credentials from the get-go so they can start teaching?
Yeah, because of the licensure requirement, they typically have to have it ahead of time. Now, our state has supported some stuff around CTE authorizations for some of this career and technical education. So if they've worked so many hours in the industry, then we can hire them on a conditional. and then they just have to go back and take, some educational theory or CTE courses
Right.
for that educational side of things. So we've hired industrial tech teachers that way, some health sciences teachers that way. And then currently we, our auto ones have been that as well. But we've been a little bit creative with our last few, I call them non-traditional routes of becoming a teacher, that they don't have any of that teacher training, right? So you put these people in, it's one thing to manage other adults in a working environment, but you put them in with a bunch of high school kids. It's different, right? It's a different type of management. And so we started to do a little bit more of a transition where our teachers typically teach 3 out of 4 blocks a day. So we will start them small and transition them in so they can go in and like view other classes, watch teachers in action, work with our instructional coaches, some of our mentors. And we've had a lot of success with that recently to help build that capacity to keep them wanting to continue to teach.
Gotcha. That's a great approach. I really, really like that. Thank you for joining me today.
Well, good luck in your journey. So
All right. Thanks,
thank
Kristy.
you. All right. Take care.